Welcome to twitch.tv/Adobe. Welcome to the Adobe Twitch channel. My name is Terry White, worldwide design and photography evangelist for Adobe, and it's my pleasure to stream to you for another hour on Intro to Photoshop Part 2 as a part of my new Creative Cloud learning stream. So, as a matter of fact, let's make it official. Let's put the learning stream up there. Thanks guys for joining me or sticking with me if you watched the first hour, or coming in just now if you're here for Photoshop. And this learning stream first started on this past Tuesday, was part 1. Part 1 was just really getting around in the interface. Part 2 today is an exciting day because we get to talk about one of the most important aspects of Photoshop, and that is making selections. Selections, to be successful in Photoshop, you really have to be good at making selections, because that's really going to drive how you can manipulate photos and what you can do with your photos, and just having an overall good understanding of how selections work will help you immensely. Now, if you're watching this on the replay or video on demand, this was a live broadcast. It happens every Tuesday and Friday for me at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Actually, the learning stream starts at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, but I'm on at 10. And it's live here at twitch.tv/Adobe. If you're watching the replay, whether it's on twitch.tv/Adobe/profile or terrywhite.tv, you'll notice that I do this a lot, where I'm looking over here because on this monitor I've got a chat window open where I'm talking with the people that are live, because this is a live stream. So the benefit of it being live is people get to ask questions, they get to interact. And in my last stream that just wrapped up, there were lots of questions about how to make EPUB or ebooks and make them interactive. And so those people got a chance to ask their questions and see the examples, or at least hear the answer, which you don't get to do on a replay or a video or a tutorial that you normally see on YouTube. So that's the whole point of us being live here at twitch.tv/Adobe. And now we're going to go ahead and kick the second stream off, or the part 2 of my Creative Cloud learning stream, which is how to get our Introduction to Photoshop CC part 2, which is all about making selections. So let me get my computer ready here. I can go ahead and close out of this InDesign document. And let's get out of InDesign. Let's get out of my iPad. Let's get out of eBooks, and then I'll switch over so you guys can see it. Kind of just cleaning house a little bit here. All right. And let me switch gears. Well, that's interesting. My streaming software, okay, it's catching up now. My streaming software wasn't showing my desktop properly. Now it is. All right, so one question right off the bat. How much of this will relate to other versions of Photoshop? I'll just put it that way. It's not exactly the way they worded it, but that's it in a nutshell. It will relate quite a bit. There will be some things that will not be in earlier versions of Photoshop. But for the most part, most of it should be for every Photoshop user. Let's put it that way. All right. So with that said, let's dive in. I don't necessarily have a particular area I'm going to start with or focus on, or a list in order. I'm just going to pick some photos, and we're going to talk about various ways of making selections in those photos. And that way you'll kind of get like a gist of all the various ways, or I'll say the top ways that people use to make selections. So number one, I kind of saw this photo. My good friend Victoria was working on a couple of these the other day. And there is some, when you have a photo like this, there's things that you'll struggle with in making a selection. Because although she's isolated on a background that's looks pretty easy to make a selection from, the problem is you have things where you have colors that blend in like this to the background. So if you're not careful, if you're using the wrong tool, when you make your selection, it won't distinguish between the object and the object's background. So people are always asking me, well, how would you cut something out from the background if the background's difficult, or if the person's the same, wearing the same color as what they're standing behind or against. And it's not easy. It's not fun. That's why there are multiple ways to make selections. So I'm going to take you through some of the old school, not necessarily good ways first. That way you'll have an appreciation for the better ways I'm about to show you. So first and foremost, I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this photo just so we can bring it up. So I'll grab my magnifying tool. We'll click and drag and zoom in a little bit. And first and foremost, if you want to make a selection, I would say for the past 25 years, every major version of Photoshop, no matter what features were introduced, also introduced a new way to make a selection. That's because selecting is so important and every photo is different that there will always be better or different ways to make a selection based on the photo. It just depends. So for example, back in the early days, you didn't have that many ways to make a selection. So what you might have done is you might have reached for something like a lasso tool. And I'll do it the hard way because I'll do it with a mouse. And if you try and hand select your way around, you're asking for pain because it's only as steady as your hand. I'm using my mouse right now. I'm not cheating and using my pen, which would be a little bit more accurate. And when you mess up like that, well, you can't stop, because if you stop, then it will assume you're done with the selection, and then you go in and you try and you'll spend a lot more time trying to fix it, or you'll have to start over. So doing it this way, you're asking for headache, pain, frustration, because while the lasso tool is not necessarily a bad tool, it's a bad tool for this kind of selection. Can I make it work? Yeah, but it's going to take me a lot longer to make it work than using a different way. Now, let's say I did want to, I kind of got going here and I did want to kind of make this work. Okay, I made a mistake there. Do I have to stop and start over? Well, not really, because the selection tools, most of them have the ability to add or subtract from a selection. So for example, even though I'm on the lasso, if I start lassoing something else right now, it's going to say, oh, you don't really want this. Let me start the new thing you're doing. So I don't want that to happen. What I want to happen is to fix something on a selection I've already made. Now, while I would never use the lasso for a selection like this because it's just too painful, I would absolutely use the lasso a lot of times to fix a selection I made with a different tool. So even if you make a selection with one tool, that doesn't mean you can't enhance the selection with another tool. So in this case, wrong tool, but let's say I kind of almost have it. How can I fix it? Well, the lasso itself has a start over mode by default. So if I start making a selection right now, it's going to say, it's going to delete this, or not delete, but discard this selection and start a new one. However, I hold down my shift key, you notice that the selection tool or the lasso now has a plus sign right below it. Here, let me zoom in so you can see it. See that plus sign? That's because I'm holding down the shift key. So that means I want to add to my existing selection. I don't want to start over. So I might add to the existing selection here. Where I missed part of her hair, I might want to add that. Oh, hang on, still not out far enough. I might want to add that in and just loop around and say, yeah, add that to it. The same thing applies if I hold down my Option or Alt key. That means subtract from the selection, where I can say, oops, I didn't really mean to go out that far. Subtract this piece from the selection. So no matter what tool you start off with, bad idea here, by the way, wrong tool. That doesn't mean that the tool itself is bad. It's just bad for this type of selection. But I use the lasso all the time to fix things, to fix selections that I used with other tools. Same thing here. I want to hold down my Option or Alt key and kind of just subtract that little bump out of my selection. I want to hold down my Shift key and add in some more of the hair to add into that selection. I still didn't go out far enough. There we go. There we go. Okay. Same thing here where I'm missing part of her ear. I can hold down my Shift key to add in. So, was that the best way to do that? Absolutely not. But did you learn some things about the lasso tool? I think so, or I hope so, especially if you're a beginner. Okay. Next up. Hang on, I'm just looking at comments here. Okay. What if I want more? Obviously, I don't want, well, not obviously, but I don't want just her head. I want more of this. So, do I continue building on that selection I just made, or do I start over? It's up to you. I'm going to show you how to start over because, again, that wasn't the best tool to use for this in the first place. So I'm going to use a key that or keyboard command that we talked about in part 1, which is deselect. Now, obviously, if I start selecting something else, it will deselect this head and start a new selection. But what if I don't want to start a new selection? I just want to deselect. So that's Command D on Mac, Control D on Windows, deselect. All right, now that was one way. The other tool from back in the day that we used to use was the magic wand tool, or as some like to affectionately refer to it as the tragic wand tool. Now the magic wand has a tolerance setting, and it defaulted to, at least for many years, 32. Now that number is just an arbitrary number. You can use whatever number you want, but let me show you what the magic wand tool does. It's designed to select based on similar colors, and that tolerance tells it how tolerable to be towards differences in color. So for example, if I click on the white, it's very tolerable. Right now it's selecting everything that it thinks is that shade of white, including the background. So I could say, it's not quite everything I need, and it's getting more than I need over here. So if I adjust the tolerance down, yes, it would potentially not get the background over here, but then it would also stop getting some of the stuff I do want. So I'm not going to worry about this right now because that I know I can fix. I'm going to hold down, again, the Shift key is always add to a selection. I'm going to say add that in. And now it just gets crazy because it's like, oh God, now it's selecting everything. And that's not what I want. So Command D, deselect. So bring the tolerance down. Let's bring it down to half. Let's bring it down to 16. And now I click here, and oh, that's a lot more manageable. Hold down the Shift key. Oh yeah, that's cool. But you notice what you'll be doing? You'll be clicking forever trying to get all this. And then you'll still be frustrated because it's still getting more than you want. So magic wand, not for this. Not for this anyway. Now deselect, Command D. If I wanted her skin, Shift key, Shift key, Shift key, Shift key. I might be able to get her, but now the tolerance may be too low. So let's bring the tolerance back up. Because she's contrasty enough from everything else, oops, sorry about that, that this might work. Now there's a lot of little differences in her skin tone, makeup, and all that here. But see, then it starts jumping around and getting other things that I don't want. This is why these tools, while they were in the original versions of Photoshop for many years, are no longer the right tools to use for things like this. Okay, so I've shown you two pretty much from day one Photoshop tools. They're pluses and minuses, mostly minuses for a selection like this. And this is why we don't do it this way. All right, so deselect. That's why the magic wand is not even, and hang on for a minute, let me switch back to essentials. That's why the magic wand tool is not even the default anymore. Quick select is. So quick select is the default tool in that same box where quick select and magic wand are. Now what's quick select? Quick select is an evolution of what the magic wand is, and it's more intelligent, still makes mistakes, but makes a lot fewer mistakes than magic wand does, and just does a better job overall. It has a brush size. You can adjust your brush size with your bracket keys, so the keys next to on a US keyboard. If you're out of the country and you have a different keyboard, I'm sorry, I don't know what your keys are. But if you're on a US keyboard, next to the letter P as in Paul, you've got a left bracket and a right bracket. The right bracket makes the brush bigger. The left bracket makes the brush smaller. So when I make the brush bigger, the way this tool works is you click and drag. So when I drag, I am telling it I want all of this selected. Okay, I can let go, and notice it spins for a second. That's because it's thinking. It's learning about what you want based on what you're doing. So again, quick select, quick select. Oop, got too much. That's okay. I'm not going to worry about it. The rest of it's good. Quick select. And you can always undo if it like grabbed too much right off the bat. You can say, oh, no, undo that last little piece, Command Z. And let me try it again. That's okay. That's okay. You can also click with it. You don't have to drag. Now that got too much. So now what I can do is I can say, well, I kind of like everything else. You just grab too much up here that I don't need. Hold down your Option key or your Alt key. You can subtract. You can subtract back out some of the stuff that you don't want it to get. And the Quick Select tool is designed to keep getting smarter. So as you start to tell it things you want, tell it things you don't want, it should continue to make a better selection of those things. So see how much further we've gotten with just a few clicks on this fairly difficult selection, because it is so similar to the background, than we were getting with the other original two tools that have been in Photoshop for years. And of course I can make my brush smaller, and I can kind of get in there where I missed some. And same thing here. Don't miss the dress. Get her head. Get her ear. And this part that it shouldn't select in the middle here, hold down the Option or Alt key and tell it not to select that part. Option or Alt key, not to select that part. Let go, it's already on the plus sign, Option key, and it learns, it gets better. Same thing here. And a little bit more up here. Now, full disclosure, I have never, ever selected this image before. What you saw me do was the first time I've ever opened this image and the first time I've ever attempted to select it with this tool. But this is one of the ways I would have attempted to make this selection, because I know that all the other tools are going to have problems with the image being so similar to the background. Whereas Quick Select learns and gets a little better each time you click. It starts to learn, oh, well, he doesn't want that particular tone. He wants this particular tone. So within a few clicks maybe, I was able to get most of it selected. All right, what's up, Echo Smith, or Echo Sith, I should say, sorry. In all my years of Photoshop, I've never known about Control D. Yeah, deselect. I've been using it for years. Couldn't imagine not using deselect. All right, so same thing here. It will get smarter as it gets closer to that edge. And then you can zoom in. You can start saying things like, that little piece in there should not be selected because that's in between the dress and the fabric. So hold down the Option or Alt key. And we can start teaching it. Now this is very similar to that fabric, so it's really having a struggle trying to figure out, well, what does he want? What does he not want? And again, I can zoom in some more, make my brush even smaller, and really get in here tight. And we want more of that and less of this. And more of her skin, less of the background, and it continues to learn. All right, that's good. So, selections with magic wand, lasso, quick select so far. And you've seen the difference of which ones for a selection like this would be better. Now, when you make an intricate selection like this, 9 times out of 10, you've missed something. Because it's so intricate, you're not seeing, like I'm looking at a piece right here I just missed on the edge. Or a piece that I should have zoomed in on. So what you need to do is what we call an image walk around. So where you're kind of like walking around the entire edge of the image to see areas you might have missed, and you want to zoom in to do that walk around. Because otherwise, I guarantee for something big and intricate like this, you have missed something. Something either got selected that shouldn't be, or something didn't get selected that should have been. And it happens all the time. I go to move in, and I was like, where's her eye? Where's her finger? Yeah, I made a selection, I missed a finger, or missed an eye, or missed something that wasn't obvious right off the bat. So I've learned to do my walkarounds, or my image walkarounds, after I made my selection to make sure I'm getting every little piece. So an image walkaround would look like this, where we go around the image, make sure we got all the little edges. I'm just holding down my space bar and panning my way around to make sure I've got the image selected good all the way around. Like I would have missed this. Because zoomed out looks great. Now the shadow I'm okay with not getting in this case. So I don't really need that shadow. And if I'm not going to have the shadow, then I need to be consistent about it and not have the shadow all the way across. Like there. All right. Moving around, moving around, moving around. More fabric on the dress. Get some of that. Oh yeah, see I really messed up on her back. Holding down the Option key to subtract. Letting go of the Option key, which the quick select is already automatically in add mode. So take a moment to walk your way around the image to make sure you're not missing things like the side of her face. The top of her head. All right, that all looks good. More fabric. It's kind of barely hard to see, or hard to see. That looks good. That looks good. All right, missed this up here. Missed this right here. Got too much of this in here. All right, I think we're back around where we started. Okay, once you make your selection and you're happy with it, you walked around all your way around, you walked all the way around, you're happy with it, what do you do now? Selections are typically made for a reason. Because A, you want to do something to just the selected part of the photo. B, you want to take that selected area and separate it from the photo. C, you want to remove the selected area. So those are all valid reasons for why you would make a selection. Here's the other piece about selections you need to know. By default, selections are very hard-edged, which means, and I'm going to quickly demonstrate this just to show you. So I'm going to do some steps that I'm going to rush through just to show you what it looks like. I'm going to hit Command J or Control J on Windows to separate that selection onto its own layer. So now it's on its own layer all by itself. I'm going to put something behind it on a new layer. And again, I'm not expecting you to learn all this real quick. I'm just showing you what that selection we just did. All right, let's grab a color like, I don't know, we'll use black. All right, let's use black. We'll fill in that background. Okay. Now, that's what our selection, that's what our cutout would really look like. Zoomed out, it looks okay. It looks pretty good, actually. Zoomed in, it looks like you literally cut it out with scissors. You see this white edge. You see this hard line. It looks amateurish, like the person using Photoshop. Yeah, you cut it out, but you didn't really make it look real because you cut it out with a selection tool, but you didn't take it to the next step. All right, so let's go back. Undo, step backwards, and step back to our selection. Okay, with our selection made, to alleviate that hard edge, you either need to soften the selection by feathering it, or you need to use another selection method if your goal is to cut it out. So to soften a selection once you've made it, all you have to do is go up to your select menu, come down to modify and feather. Now there is no wrong or right number for feathering because it all depends on the size of the thing you have selected, the resolution of the image you have selected, so forth and so on. So I can't give you a number that will always work. You'll have to try different numbers based on your image. But I would say a minimum of 2 pixels at least, unless it's a very, very low res image. And I would probably say no more on average than 3 or 4, because you're not trying to ghost out the edges, you're just trying to soften them a little bit. So a 2 pixel radius in this case will probably do the trick, maybe 3 pixels, but 2 in this case should probably be fine. So all I'm doing by changing this number or using the number 2, when I click OK, all that did to my selection was feather out the edges by 2 pixels. Soften the edges up so it doesn't look like it's so hard cut out with a pair of scissors. That's all it did. So now if I were to set that, Command J, put it on its own layer, Control J on Windows, put a layer in between them that is a different color, and now we were to zoom in on it, it's still not going to be perfect. It's going to look softer. It's going to look better. So see how much softer that edge is compared to the 0 pixels feathering. So in this case, maybe even 1 pixel might be enough for this image. Depends on the resolution. But that's a much softer cutout than we had before. Now you still have this white edge. So how do you get rid of that? Well, if you go back to your original image, there are some built-in tools to take care of that. One of which, under the layout menu, an old feature that's been here from, I don't know, almost day 1 with layers, since version 3 of Photoshop, remove white matte. Remove white matte, in most cases, will take care of the white edge. In this case, it really didn't get it all because I just wasn't close enough to her shoulder. But if it got it everywhere else, I'll just fix the shoulder. It's not worth trying to make it work for everything else. But that was remove white matte. There's also under the layer menu, defringe, which will also remove the edge from the original background by 1 pixel in this case. So there are all kinds of ways to soften, get rid of some of that excess, including, I'm going to show you one more way. So undo, 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 put it back. And let's see if I undo one more time. Undo the feathering. One more way to do this is if you've made your selection, and for example, I know the shoulder is a problem. Even though it looks like I'm right on the edge of the shoulder, like that should be good. You can also, depends on the selection you're making, depends on the object you're selecting, you can also tell Photoshop to come in a little bit. In other words, I've gone all the way around And if you come in by 1 pixel, I'm okay with that. It's up to you. What you can do in that case is you can say select, modify, contract by one, two, how many ever pixels you want. But in other words, bring the selection in by 1 pixel. So that brought it in a little closer. And yeah, am I cutting off part of her ear and part of her chin and all that? Yep, I am. But it depends on what I'm doing. That may still look okay. It still be okay. So you have various ways to do this. Also, another way that once you've made your selection, I just undid that contract, by the way. Command Z. Photoshop also has a masking feature. And we're going to do, all right, hold on. Let me go back. I see some questions here. All right, let me go all the way back up. Did you paste the lady on a black background? Okay, I already did that. Must be in whole numbers. Yes, it is in whole numbers. Where do you enter the 2 pixels? Under select, feather, 2 pixels. Someone already got that. What step was that? I don't know what step you're talking about. For the background. Again, talking a complete sentence. People are putting in the answers. Okay, good. All right. So, and now you just made me lose my train of thought. Student selection. Oh, masking. Okay, so one of the ways that we can make minute adjustments to the selection is using a mask. Now, masking usually requires or does require you to be on a layer. So in this case, I'm on the background. So I just snapped a photo with my phone, camera, whatever. Opened it in Photoshop. Photoshop's automatically on default to the image being on the background. We're going to do a whole hour on layering. So this is not the layering episode. But in this case, if I want to mask that selection, then what I can do is first make a layer. And by the way, I don't actually have to make the layer first. It will do this in CC now all automatically, I believe. So hang on, let me test this. Yep, it did it automatically. Okay, so let me show you where this is. In the past, you would have had to make the layer first, then add a layer mask to it. But now CC keeps getting smarter, keeps saying, okay, why am I going to make you do extra steps? I'll just do it all for you. So what a mask is the icon right here at the very bottom of your layers panel. It's called Add Layer Mask, Add a Mask. And what that says is I'm going to take the selection you just made and I'm going to create a mask from it, hiding everything else on that layer that's not selected. So just by, watch what happens to background. Just by clicking that button one time, it changed it from background to layer 0 because it knew it had to be a layer to use a mask anyway. It added this mask, which is this black and white icon right here, and it hid everything else. So everything else is still there. You haven't deleted the background. You just hid it with that mask. And that, if you learn nothing else about extracting from the background or removing things from the background or removing elements, that's your most important thing. Because the mask is way more forgiving for a mistake than physically cutting her out of the background and pasting her into another background. Because the background's still there. If I missed a piece, if I don't like the way it looks, if I want to make changes, I can. Because I have a mask. Now again, this is not intended to be the how to use layers episode. We have one of those coming up. But just to show you, adding that mask, we're going to do one more thing. We're going to add another layer. We're going to pull, I just clicked the new layer icon. We're going to pull that layer down below so it's below everything else. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. We're just going to add black. So to add, I selected my black and white color or my black foreground, and I held down on the Mac, Option Delete, PC, Alt, Backspace, I believe. And that just filled that layer with black. You can fill it with whatever color you want. All right, so now we have this layer and we have this layer. So the eyeball hides it or shows it. So now I've got this on a layer by itself, and I've got the mask. So let me zoom in and let me show you what I mean by the mask. So I zoom in and I say, oh no, it's got a white edge on it and I don't like the white edge. Okay, I don't say it in that voice, but just in case you talk that, here it is. So this is a toggle between the mask and the layer. I'm on the layer now, I'm on the mask now, I'm on the layer now, I'm on the mask now. So whichever one you have selected, that's the one you're working with. And you'll see the one that's selected because it has the outline around it. Now I'm working on the pixels on the layer. Now I'm working on the mask. So with the mask selected, I can now grab a paintbrush. And painting is either in black or white. You can do gray, but black and white will hide or add to the mask. So for example, if I make my brush smaller, same bracket keys we used for the quick select tool, and I paint with black, I am now hiding that edge that I don't like. I'm not deleting those pixels. Those white pixels are still there. I'm just saying, I want to clean that edge up that just never looked right around her shoulder, and I want to soften that edge up a little bit more. So I can take a few seconds to clean that up and make that look good. Same thing around her hand, just a little too much of that fabric showing around her hand. We can clean that up with a mask and make that look better. Now, you might be asking, well, Terry, couldn't you just use an eraser? Why are you going through this mask and a paintbrush and painting with black and all that? Because this is working, we're going to do a whole episode on working non-destructively, but this is working non-destructively because what I can do with a mask is I can say, I want to hide this edge and smooth it out. And then 2 weeks later, I can come back and say, no, switch to white paint, bring that edge back. Wherever that edge was. So that's a bad example because now I can't see what I was doing. Here, let's do it on her hair. All right, let's do it this way. So I can say, let's say no bun. Maybe our client doesn't want a bun anymore on top of her head. So we can say no bun. This will be easier. So we're just hiding it with black paint on the mask. No bun. And then 2 weeks later, we save the file, we come back 2 weeks later, and the client says, well, for this spread, we want the bun. So now I just switch to white paint, toggle it, and I can paint the bun back in. Because the bun was never deleted. It was never erased like an eraser would have done. It was just hidden with the mask. So the mask, basically the black color hides it, the white color shows it. And if I go out too far, I'll start bringing in background, and that's okay, because maybe I want to bring in some of the background so I can see where it is. Now I can toggle back to black, smaller brush, and hide the rest of the bun or the background that I don't need. So that's what working with a mask will allow you to do versus physically cutting images out, physically deleting pixels, physically erasing things where there's no return. This way I don't have to have a duplicate layer that has the pixels on it and so forth and so on. Unless I just want both versions, then I could duplicate the layer. But in this case, I'm cutting in that really bad, but just for the sake of example. There we go. We'll smooth that out a little bit. But, and I did that quick and dirty, but this way I get ultimate control. I get the ability to add, subtract, anything I want because it's all still there, just hidden with the mask. Okay. Does it automatically change your foreground colors to black and white? Yes, it does, and hitting the letter X swaps them. Absolutely. When you're in the mask. When you're not in the mask, so when I toggle back to not in the mask, then I'm back to the black and whatever pearl color that is. All right. Yes, I'm using a Wacom tablet. I'm using a Cintiq. Cintiq 27 QHD to be exact. But my hands cam is down, so otherwise I'd show it to you. All right. Other ways of making selections. So we did a lot so far. We did a lot to make a selection in the first place, hide the background with a mask. Just by clicking the mask icon, we'll automatically convert that to a layer and give us a layer mask. Then I showed you how to paint with black or white to hide or show, clean up edges, do whatever you need. And now you could put this on any background you wanted. So for example, if this was the background I really wanted, I can go back to that layer, drag this in, and then I could end up with something like this. Now, there are some things keeping this from looking totally real, but you got the idea. First of all, she's too big. Second of all, there's no reflection in the water. Lots of things we would adjust, and we're going to talk about all that when we come to our layers episode. But that's why we make selections, is to be able to do things just like this. To be able to take something from one element, one environment, and put it onto another one. Can I make image adjustments, hue, brightness on non-destructively using masks? Well, not really using masks. What you would do is something called smart objects, which we're going to talk about in the layering episode that's to come. Why are you not using refine edge? Because I haven't got to it yet. What else? And by the way, when someone comes in with a question like that, they're not a beginner. This is for beginners. Because you named a feature that a beginner wouldn't even know about. All right, so you just told yourself. All right, so as I was saying, let's get to other ways of making selections. So let's bring up the swans here. Now, the swans would be equally difficult. They'd be equally hard to make a selection from, because you've got that white on white that would be hard to do. One of the ways that we can, I know you want to see smart objects and don't know a lot about them. That's what this learning stream is about, but today is not the smart object day, so stay tuned. So we're going to do another way of making selections using the swan. And I don't need both swans, I only want one, because I can always duplicate it if I really need to anyway. And it looks like this is just a duplicate anyway. They're identical. Same feathers, everything. So I only really need to select one. Then I can make a duplicate if I really need a second one. All right, so same thing. How would I make the selection? Not with the lasso. Not with the magic wand. I could start with quick select. I want to point out another way just so you know about it, even though it would not apply to this particular one. Or maybe I should look and see if there's another image that would be better for it. All right, you know what? I'll do it after this one. Okay, so in real world, how would I make the selection? I would use two methods. I would start with, I just want to make sure I got enough time. Okay, I would start with quick select to kind of give Photoshop an idea of what I'm looking for. And again, I don't need both swans. They're identical anyway, and I can always duplicate it if I need the other one. All right, so I kind of just go in. Quick Select's doing a decent job there. Great. 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 And of course, like we said, there are some things that Quick Select's not going to know about, or it's going to do incorrectly. So let's go in, hold down our Option key, Option key, and subtract some of that out. Option key, make our brush a little smaller, subtract some of that out. Option key, subtract some of that out, and let go of the Option key to get a little bit more of the feathers. Small brush, small size, and we walk our way around the image. Probably best if we zoom in a little more so we can make sure we're not missing pieces. Because I always, always, always miss pieces when I'm zoomed out. All right. Yep, see I missed all of this. Okay. Would this selection be good enough? Depends. But let's pretend it's not good enough. What I want to be able to do on this white, almost on white background is I want Photoshop to now make a selection that's smarter. Meaning I kind of gave it an idea of what I'm looking for. I want Photoshop now, and I missed some of this here, to do the rest. This is why you walk your way around the entire image. You will miss stuff if you don't. All right, for the sake of time, I'm going to miss stuff. All right, but anyway, I want Photoshop now to kind of help me do the rest. And there is a feature that's been in since CS5 called Refine Edge. Refine Edge will always be present no matter what tool you made your initial selection with, as long as you're still in the selection tool and as long as you made some kind of selection. So I'm still in the selection tool. I have Quick Select still selected. And I've made a selection of some kind using whatever tool I want. And you'll notice at the very top here it says Refine Edge. What Refine Edge was designed to do was make difficult selections. Make selections that are difficult on difficult background, that are of things that are difficult to select, like hair, things that are just impossible to do with Quick Select completely. Now the feathers here aren't that bad, but if this were hair or this were really furry, maybe I should pick a person to do this with, but the same technique would apply. Refine Edge, and it will preview, it'll bring up this dialog to start to show you what it looks like. Now your preview may not be set correctly. It may be on marching ants. You could see it as an overlay. You could see it black. In this case, black would probably be the better way to see it. These are just previews to let you see what it's going to look like or what you've done so far. So let's look at it on black. All right, so now that I'm previewing it, I can say, and this is one of my favorite features in Refine Edge, which is called edge detection. Edge detection gives it that intelligence. Remember in the other selection, we were trying to use feather and we were trying to use all those things to kind of soften the selection. This does all that for you. So I'm never really having to do the 2-pixel feather, the fringe, and all those things because Refine Edge does a better job from the start. So I can go in and I can say Smart Radius, which tells it to look for things that should be hard edge, like the beak, and look for things that should be soft edge, like the feathers. So I can go in and I can say that I want to increase the radius. In other words, increase the amount of smartness it's looking for. So for example, or edge it's looking for. I can increase that a little bit, and what that will start to do is just make everything around the edges look better. The beak will look a little sharper, the feathers will look a little softer automatically. Now you have all kinds of adjustments going down, most of which you probably don't need to do. Shift Edge, remember that contract feature I showed earlier? Shift Edge does that for you. So if you want to bring it in a pixel, shift it a little bit to the left. I don't need to do it on this photo, but that will help me. Now, if you missed areas, so for example, it takes you to a brush called Refine Radius. That brush, which we can make bigger, not that big, will help you by showing you the background that you had, brushing along the edge, and redefining that background based on where you're painting. So areas where I may have missed some, I can, oh, that's a bad one, undo. I can tell it to kind of fix some of that using the Refine Radius tool. In this case, we don't want that. In this case, it was already pretty good. So it will clean up those edges where you may have missed some of the background or didn't get the background just right. Now, once you get it all set, looking at that swan the way you want, you can go in and say, output this. What do you want to output this as? Well, I don't want to output just the selection. While you're at it, go ahead and make a new layer. Go ahead and make a new layer with a mask. That way I got the best of both worlds. I got my new layer separated out with a mask in case I still miss something and I want to go back and fix it. So now I'll click OK. And there's my new layer with a mask ready to go. You may be asking, well, what if you want to combine, and again, this is getting into the whole layering thing we're going to do in a minute, or next episode. What if you want to put it over here? Well, the whole thing would be, and this is a kind of just a tip, we're going to do the whole layering thing, don't worry about learning it today. We're going to take the move tool we have right here, we're going to pick up our swan, we can move our swan around, we're going to drag it up to the same tab that has everything else. Don't let go. If you let go, nothing's going to happen. Drag it down into the image and then let go. And that will give you your swan on its own layer. So now the swan is there, totally too big, totally in front or behind her. We can move it up. We can free transform it down to be smaller. And these are all things you're going to learn in the layering episode that is forthcoming. And we're going to flip it horizontal and kind of maybe have it coming out a little bit more that way. And anyway. So, last method for making selections in my last 6 minutes of this episode. Let me bring up one of my best examples for this last method. And we'll do we'll do this one. I've done this example a million times, but it just shows it off so well. All right, you have a situation like this where you have a person with hair. That always makes it harder. And you want to separate, his name's Jesse, you want to separate Jesse out from the background. Matter of fact, you want to do the thing you see in magazines all the time, where you've got text and you want Jesse in front of the text, but still see the background. So you want it basically to look like this, but without the background. So all I did was duplicate the background, or I added text, that, and then I duplicated the background and put it on top. So my layers look like this. Background, text, or a duplicate of Jesse again. Now, with that layer on top, the one I want to cut out, because it's still the whole background buildings, I want to get rid of the buildings so that we can see Jesse on top of the lettering. With Jesse's layer selected, we're going to do our last selection method. It's under the select menu. Now, there's more selection methods, but the last one we have time for. In Photoshop CC, there's a new method of selection called focus area. What focus area allows me to do is let Photoshop select what's in focus in this image. So field, basically, it's saying we can see Jesse's in focus and the buildings are out of focus. So therefore, it can make a selection based on that. So if I say focus area, no hands, it's calculating, figuring it out, and it made a mask based on what was in focus. Now, it's wrong. His vest shouldn't be red. It thinks the vest is out of focus. No problem. We can go ahead and tell, and the hair is really bad. We can go ahead and fix the vest first of all. I can come in and I can just say paint a little bit around that red and say recalculate based on that. And this area, this little bit of fabric over here, I can say either add that in or take it out. We can add that in. All right, now that takes care of getting what's in focus, but it's doing a really bad job on his hair, the back of his sweater, everything else. Well, remember I said you have refine edge no matter what method of selection you used, even focus area. So I've got focus area as a selection method and refine edge is built into it. So I can switch out of focus area into Refine Edge where we just were, and I can say, you know what? I need you to clean up this background around his hair. So start the sign on the background, kind of paint some of that in, and I want you to recalculate the mask based on that background color. And like magic, it does that. I can also go in and I can say that I want to do smart radius and increase that to kind of clean up the back sweater a little bit. All right, so now that I've got that, I want a new layer with a mask. Okay, and there he is. So if there were areas that got missed, I can go in and work on those areas with my paintbrush. I can say these little specks of missing skin, let's put those back in, and anything else that needs to be cut. Now the text is on a layer all by itself, so I can move it around, and we can see how good of a job it did with the hairs with Refine Radius and the text. All right, so the most frequently used methods of selections. Are they the only ones? No. There's the pen tool. There's quick mask. There's not a million, but dozens more. But those are the ones that people use the most. So with that said, join me next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel, 11 a.m. Eastern Time here at twitch.tv/Adobe for part 3 of Introduction to Photoshop CC. Next up, I believe, is Beetlejuice. And Beetlejuice, I want you to knock it out of the park and take it home. All right, guys, thanks for watching. And like a few extra seconds, make sure I didn't miss anything here. I want to switch right on the hour here. Got 25 seconds. Let's make sure I didn't miss anything else. I guess you get what's in focus and invert the selection. You could do that as well, but in this case, I wanted what was in focus. Cool, glad you guys liked it. And with that said, thanks guys, take care, and we'll catch you on the next one. Next up, stay tuned for Beetlejuice. We'll be doing video and audio, I'm sure. Oh my.